welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the midweek edition of 21 Wire Live. I'm Patrick Henningsen, your host. Thank you for joining us. We're going to be joined by a very special guest, of course, one of our top contributors and analyst, Freddie Ponton, is going to be joining us in a moment. And this is the main topic this week. I mean, unavoidable. There's so many big stories, of course. We'd love to cover Syria, although we did extensive coverage on that issue over the weekend. So if you missed any of that, check out on the Sunday Wire, which is on our various live streams and platforms, Rumble, YouTube, X, Facebook Live, BitChute, and soon to be Odyssey. Apologies for our Odyssey audience. We haven't quite fixed the API up for that, but we're working on it. Should be ready by Sunday. So another live stream to add to our bow. We're going to be talking about the negotiations between, Russia, the United States, and Ukraine and the EU. A lot of fanfare, a lot of hype, a lot of talk of a ceasefire, but it's only coming from one side, and that's where the problem begins. We're going to break this down during the next few, most of the next hour. Let me bring on to the stage Freddie Ponton, who's joining us right now on the live link. Freddie, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm very good, Patrick. Good to be on the show.
It's great to have you as well. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule, Fred. I know you've been doing quite a lot of media these days, and also a lot of research and getting quite a lot of look in on your Nord Stream sabotage article, which you published recently at 21st Century Wire. So a lot of interest, I'm told, Freddie, as well on the continent, as well in this story that you've published recently.
Yes, absolutely. I'm delighted. It's really getting traction in Europe, and more importantly in Germany, since Germany is very much involved in this investigation on the Nord Stream sabotage. It doesn't mean the German did it, and I want to be clear about that. But at least it's provided a lot of information which I think was unknown to many. And as I explained earlier to Gareth Ike, this is really a first segment. There's more to come. And really what's interesting here is that we are laying the foundation as far as understanding and bringing a new perspective to the events that led to the destructions of the Nord Stream pipeline. So I'm delighted that the Germans have picked it up. Journalists are speaking of it. I'm getting invited on different shows. So yeah, it's looking up.
Yeah, no, very good. Great work, by the way, on that article, Fred. Now, what do you make of this latest situation here? I'm going to play you a clip from a joint press conference. I believe this was from Saudi Arabia. This is Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz. I believe this is the national security advisor for Donald Trump. They're talking about this peace deal, that they supposedly have a deal, or they say they're having a deal. It's hard to work out what's actually going on here. We're going to break it down. I want to get your take on this, but let me bring that press conference up and we'll get your comment on this. Here it is.
Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. I want to personally we both want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty, for hosting us, for making this possible. They've been instrumental in this process, and we're very grateful to them for hosting us here today. And hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball is now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Well, okay, the ball is in the Russians' court, Freddie. Now, that's an interesting slogan. That's an interesting strapline. The ball is in Russia's court. Rubio also tweeted this, and so did everybody else, Freddie. Ursula von der Leyen, the ball is now in Russia's court. Emmanuel Macron, the ball is now in Russia's court. Kaja Kallas, callous by name, callous by nature, the ball is always in Russia's court. So it's like the ball is now in Russia's court. The ball is now clearly in Russia's court, says Macron, and the ball is always in Russia's court, says Kaja Kallas. And the British, not to be outdone, Freddie, Keir Starmer, official declaration here, the ball is now in Russia's court. And not to be outdone, of course, Zelensky's own private PR consultant, Lex Fridman, the biggest simp for Zelensky, pretty much on the internet and in America. Great news today. The ball is in Putin's court, hoping for a possible ceasefire in Ukraine soon. A little emoji of a dove there, carrying a laurel leaf. How sweet of Lex Fridman. Freddie, do you remember that video that was going around a couple years ago where all those news readers are saying, this is dangerous for our democracy? Like this. So have they hired the Democrats' PR company? Because this is what the Democrats normally do. So where is this coming from? My guess, British PR firm, messaging, synchronization of messaging. This is kind of weird, to be quite honest. So what about all this Trump's taking it in a different direction? Is that all finished now? What's going on, Freddie?
I think Churchill will be impressed. Look, it's really unbelievable. I mean, this is clearly really a great lesson in terms of understanding how business works and how they carry out their business. When I mean governments, and especially the Western governments, it's pretty much basically they run a story, and the medias are there to draw a narrative that these guys are enemies, and suddenly there's really nothing to be saved. US wants to pull out of Ukraine, stop the war, be friendly with the Russians, and the Europeans are left hanging in a desperate rearming Europe kind of deal with Ursula von der Leyen, the Queen of Europe, again, spearheading this new initiative, which can definitely get us broke. If that is not already the case. Now, what's interesting here is really the discussions in Jeddah, in Saudi Arabia, and we can clearly see that this is where this pact, if you will, was designed, was agreed upon, and the strategy here is to come basically as the United States have done for a very long time, which is trying to come with a strong hand when it hasn't have a strong hand, and trying to basically bully the person that they're going to be meeting on the other side of the table. That might work, in a corporate negotiations, although I've never seen it. But the key of the negotiations is to take the other guys on the other side of the table concerns about security, concerns about the various aspects of this conflict, because we have to go back, in the historical context of this conflict, Patrick. And this is really absolutely very rich from the Trump and the British administrations to adopt positions in a way that they feel comfortable in dictating the terms of a conflict that they have pretty much themselves triggered by the coup d'etat in 2014 in Euromaidan in Kiev, removing Yanukovych. And even the entire Minsk agreement process, during which they've basically wasted everyone's time because they were too busy rearming and arming literally Ukraine and the Azov battalion, with the latest technology. So all that is meant to be forgotten, if you will, Patrick. This is something that simply we should forget about it. It did never happen. What happens now is Russia is winning the war. Europe wants to stay in Ukraine as long as it takes, to the last Ukrainian, perhaps even to the last Europeans. But we need to be frank, and we need to go along with the US program, which started this war, literally. So none of it is making sense. And I'm just rationally trying to put myself in the shoes of any lawmakers in Russia, anyone responsible for policy, foreign affairs, and the executive branch, and looking at this clown show and thinking, what these guys think, what are they think they're doing? What are they doing? Because really, I mean, if you look at the tenures of the meeting with Zelensky and Rubio, and the expectations and what this ceasefires entails, with a peace in the sea, in the peace at the front lines, stopping all these attacks on the Russian capital. I mean, you don't start the negotiations by throwing hundreds of long-range drones into the capital city. It just simply doesn't make any sense, and it just simply does not build the trust that is so desperately needed in order to come up with some kind of peace agreement that makes sense for both sides.
What's missing in all that? That drone attack that was just last 48 hours. I didn't see. Did you see any condemnation from the White House? Did they issue a statement saying we condemn Zelensky's drone attacks on targets in Russia amid trying to put together a ceasefire deal? I mean, it's crazy. Do they think that that's going to help, getting the Russians to the table? No, it's just the opposite. If they had condemned it, at least you could then blame it on Zelensky and blame it on the rogue elements in Kiev, but they didn't. And that to me was quite striking, because
but it's part of it.
Yeah, go ahead, Fred. Go ahead.
Yeah, what I meant is it's really part of the negotiating process. It's pre-negotiations. You go and strike your enemy, you kill civilians, and you announce that basically this is pretty much the leverage that you have. That means you don't have any cards to play with, but you need that last minute leverage in order to gain some kind of momentum in these negotiations. That's just simply childish and ludicrous. Right. And it's not going to bring good news. And we can already hear the bad news coming very, very quickly with Russian lawmaker Konstantin Kosachev.
I'm going to bring that up on screen. Here he is, Freddie.
Yeah, that's him.
And this is what he said here. He said, let me just zoom in on that so people can read that. The United States, Great Britain, Germany, and France, and the Czech Republic are directly responsible for the deaths of civilians in the Russian Federation, said the Deputy Speaker of the Russian Federation Council, Konstantin Kosachev. Okay, and he goes on as well. He expands on this important point here by saying, quote, Russia demands that the parliaments of Western countries take immediate measures to stop the supply of weapons and ammunition to the criminal regime in Kiev. The Russian side will send a corresponding statement to parliaments of these countries, as well as organizations of which these states are members. It is obvious that those who provide weapons, ammunition, and billions to fuel a war are responsible for the deaths of civilians. So, like, this is basically a red line that's already been crossed. And I just cannot see, Freddie, how the U.S., if they are in fact leading Ukraine on this and not following Ukraine, I cannot see how they could allow this type of inflammatory action to take place, especially, Freddie, when they just pulled intelligence sharing with the Ukrainians, okay, and pulled support, okay, but only temporarily. They just reinstated it in the last 24 hours. That's what I'm led to believe. I don't know if you've heard any different, but it's like the whole point of pulling intelligence is to prevent the type of drone strike that could derail negotiations. That's obvious. So why would you bring back intelligence sharing, bring back arms and support, and green light a drone attack? You can't tell me they did that without U.S. permission, or did they? What do you think?
I think we've been sold a story, because, I mean, the source that I have and the information that I've gathered clearly indicates that there is a huge amount of stock in Romania that is left over. So it's not like Ukraine is running out of weaponries and technology. And you're very right about this intelligence gathering. It's extremely important. It's crucial in today's warfare. And Ukraine fighting blind is Ukraine losing terrain very quickly. And we know that Poland already today also confirmed that this aid has restarted as well. So all in all, I think nothing has changed from the Biden administration as far as the support for Ukraine. It's been a bit of a story to allow basically Russia to entertain or to build up hope that maybe with this administration we might see actually some reason and some reckoning as well in terms of admitting that they were involved in this coup d'etat in Ukraine in 2014, and therefore should take full responsibility for what is currently happening and what has happened over the past 3 years in Ukraine. So no one is obviously clearly is going to do that. So they're trying something different here. But to go back to Kosachev, he is the chairman of the international committee in the Russian Senate. So when he says something, he speaks on behalf of a lot of people. And it's very clear, this last statement I was listening earlier, he stated that any potential agreement, whether it's ceasefire or not, will be on Russian terms and not on American terms. So that's drawing pretty much very dry the line, if you will. The line has been drawn. And it's not the first one. Putin has already said it for a very long time ago, that there's not going to be a NATO presence, post Ukraine, and the ceasefire is not going to allow the rearmaments, strengthening the military, to go back to more war. This is not what Putin is looking for. Putin has a much bigger scope in mind, a much bigger vision about what this talk should look like, and it's primarily about geopolitics, respecting the sphere of influence, whether we're talking about Eastern Europe, and of course Transnistria, all the way down to Asia. So this is what you would expect from a world leader, someone that's going to address the big pictures and let its minions to take care of the details, right? But the big pictures needs to be addressed. I do not think that Putin has any interest in entertaining talk about, if a drone is going to be allowed to fly into Russia, or if maybe at sea they're going to see a little bit of peace in the Black Sea. I don't think this is about that, and I think the Trump administration especially Rubio, is missing the point here, and he's missing the point because he's not a diplomat. He's not a diplomat. Trump is not a diplomat. These are people that have a lot of, corporate backgrounds, policy backgrounds, but diplomacy is a complete different skills. And unless we're going to have diplomats like, Witkoff, this kind of guys, that kind of, strength, knowledge, expertise, that's going to be at the table, being able to really direct Donald Trump and Rubio and saying, look, this is not going to happen. And you cannot put all your cards in the same basket, all your eggs in the same basket, And very important to not rely on hope that the Russian will accept your proposal. If that is your best card, you're gonna learn a serious lesson, I believe, and I think that they're about to learn a big lesson.
Yeah, I mean, on that question of diplomacy, I think this is exactly what's happened. I've got another clip from Rubio, which we'll also play in a moment, but at another press conference. But this is the problem, and this is what when I saw that piece we played with Rubio and Mike Waltz from Saudi Arabia. You know what I heard there, Freddie? I heard Senator Rubio. Senator Rubio. He reverted to the old Marco Rubio, which is politicians speak with forked tongues. They speak out of both sides of their mouth. They lie for a living. This is what they do. This is why you have diplomats, which are all about building trust with the counterparty. So to build trust, you can't be a politician. If you're a diplomat, you cannot be a politician. Now, Trump might be in a privileged position where he's chief executive. He doesn't necessarily have to be political, but the people he's deploying are now, Rubio is just reverted to type. The honeymoon's over. He's basically reverting to what's comfortable for him. And this is the danger when you appoint people to these high important positions with zero experience, okay? They have political experience, but they have no diplomatic experience. So he's across the table from the Russians. They're all career diplomats. They're trained. They're trained. All they do is negotiations and deals, and they're all lawyers basically as well. And so they're sticklers for details. So what Rubio and Trump are attempting to do is what the Israelis do. We've got a deal. We've presented it to Hamas. The ball's in Hamas's court. We've done all we can. We've been very gracious and generous with our deal. So there's like one-sided negotiations. So it's almost like they called the Israelis and asked them for advice on how to deal with the Russians. And you know what? I wouldn't put it past the Trump administration. And so the problem as well, even with Witkoff, is he serves as Donald Trump's kind of private, let's say pre-deal emissary. So he's got a certain skill set, which is basically establishing the groundwork of what the power relationship is. But after that, the diplomats have to do the dirty work of hammering out the deals, which is very complicated. And you have wins and loses. You go back, you go forward. It's a constant dance. You got to be a good dancer as a diplomat. And Steve Witkoff is not that guy. He's another kind of guy for Trump. He plays a certain role in that process. But it seems like they have a complete vacuum of skilled diplomats so far. So they got off to a good start, Freddie. It's like, 200 meters sprint, way ahead after the first 100 meters. They got off to a great start, and now the competition is passing them. And so Rubio has fumbled it on this. He's also fumbled it on Gaza. He's now saying, oh, we tried to talk to Hamas, but it was a one-time deal. We're never going to talk to him again. So he totally fumbled that, didn't hold Netanyahu to account. Now he's using Netanyahu tactics against the Russians, which is, it's a perfectly good deal. This is a great deal. So he's not listening to the Russians. Because
if it works,
right, Freddie? The Russians said.
If it works with Hamas, it's got to work with the Russian, right?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course.
It's just, I don't know. I mean, to be honest with you, it's like, if you look at the contents of the deal, which is far beyond what the Ukrainian was hoping for, and clearly we can see that there's also a mineral deal there that has been agreed upon. So what are we doing? And I think they're mixing everything.
Yeah.
So then you have a delegation is going to Jeddah to negotiate terms with Zelensky, having him basically in a corner because he screwed up last time. And he was told what to do, which is basically to agree whatever the US want, because we can't afford to not have them with us. If they pull out of NATO, NATO will crumble. It's the law of structural engineering. If you move the main foundation, it's only a matter of time before the structures collapse. So the NATO structures will collapse without the United States. So they're going to have to do a lot and go along with the plan, if you will. And that includes Starmers and Macron, and they all have to put water in their wine. But Zelensky, if you will, is now put in his place and said, look, we're buying time here. And that's what it looks like to me. We need that ceasefire. We need to regroup. Give us the time to put it together and have more conversation with the US, see exactly how this is going to be going. And I think already these conversations have produced some kind of animosity in terms of take the deal or else, and that's the worst things you can do when you go to a negotiation table. You just don't do that. You don't show your cards. Right? You prepare the diplomats. The diplomats prepare the ground, because you actually don't get to sit down at a negotiation table when at least the fundamentals have been agreed upon. That's the rule of negotiation. And here we are meant to believe that they're just going to go and Putin's going to pick up the phone and say, that's a shit deal, but why not? No, this is not. This is clown show. This is clown time, and we cannot accept that. I can't accept any of that, because we expect some kind of serious and some kind of realism. And although they've demonstrated and displayed a bit of realism at the beginning, right now this Rubio, I knew Rubio would disappoint anyway. There was not a lot of expectations about him. I think he'll do a better job in South America. But as far as Europe, leave it to people that have an understanding of Eastern Europe. Russia have a long track record, in terms of understanding the cultural environments, the military environments, understanding in general what Russia has become. This is not the Soviet Union. This is a country that has proven itself again and again, that has repaired himself, that's put back on his feet, rearmed his country, is economically super strong, has managed to, have a positive balance sheet during wartime, and still today completely confident about the strategy they've applied on the ground, and the result is there. Today we see the Ukrainian being chucked out of the Kursk region, 7,000, 10,000 men encircled, left with no choice but to pull back, and the central city in Kursk has been now, from what I could gather today, has been under control of Russian troops. So Russians have the last card that the Ukrainian could play is Kursk, and they lost that card. So what is left apart from the US to come into these equations and playing the big guys and saying, you know what, we're the big guys here. We're going to dictate the terms of these negotiations. Well, I don't think that's going to go down very well, Patrick. I'm really afraid of that.
Here's Rubio at the follow-up press conference on this. I think this is back in either in the U.S. Embassy or back in Washington. Let's listen to what he says here.
We'll have contact with him today.
Okay, hold on for a moment. Are you able to hear that, Freddie?
Yeah.
You were? Okay, hold on.
We'll have contact with him today. There's already been contacts at different levels with counterparts, different members of the administration, and that'll continue. But as far as the Russian reaction to it, that's really the question here. And that is, this is a few hours old. We're going to bring it to them directly. We're going to say that Ukraine is prepared to stop all battlefield activity and begin the immediate process of negotiating an enduring end to the war. And we'll see what their response is. If their response is yes, then we know we've made real progress and there's a real chance of peace. If their response is no, it would be highly unfortunate and it would make their intentions clear.
I mean, Freddie, what do you make of that? Is he serious?
Well, it's diplomacy 101. It can clearly see that the groundwork has not been done. Just throw a proposal across the table and say, well, let's see what he's going to come up with. That's not how diplomacy is conducted. Sorry, I've been in the diplomatic circle for a very long time. This is not how you do it. So it's clearly kind of, quick. They're whacking it, basically. They're whacking it to say, okay, we had a good conversation. They're a little bit on the upbeat of the Jeddah meeting, and they all feel like, well, we came up with such a great idea. I think Putin could accept that. It's not a good deal for him, but I think all in all, he's really hoping, and he's been kind of saying, and the people around him have been saying that there was great hope, great energy in Russia. In diplomatic circle, people feel that there is a light at the end of the tunnel. But that doesn't mean they're gonna accept basically a direct insult. Basically, being told that we're gonna dictate the terms, so you accept this, that land you give it back for the front line. Well, we'll see later. But all in all, you stop, and then Ukraine is independent, and we're gonna go and get the minerals there, and then eventually we're gonna let Europe put the French troops and the British troops in your backyard. It's not NATO, it's just a coalition of the willing, so it's different. It's just a coalition of the willing. And that's what they're serving literally to Putin. That's what they're telling him. Accept the coalition of willing, let us take the resources in Ukraine because we need to get our money back. And whatever comes after that, it really doesn't matter because we never cared about the Ukrainian in the first place anyway. It was never about Ukraine.
You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of a couple of dodgy chefs in the kitchen who are like cooking up this cake or whatever, and they're all sitting there tasting it. Oh my God, it's delicious. All the chefs are looking at each other. This is a fantastic cake we've made here, amazing dessert with profiteroles and whatnot, but they haven't actually taken it out to the customer. So it turns out it's not a good cake. And no one's going to want to eat it. It's probably going to end up in the bin. And that's what these guys are like. They're pumping each other up. In a way, I'm kind of torn on this, Freddie. It's like, is this a political stunt to make it look like, because I'm not discounting the possibility, Fred. Donald Trump is the master of WWF, if you know what I mean. World Wrestling Federation, basically fake fights. So it's a way to make the Ukrainians look like they've got skin in the game when they don't. I'm just hoping if this is Trump 5D chess, or is this just a real F up? That I can't work out which one it is, because he should have the mineral deal is so stupid. That was a chance just to pivot out of the whole Ukraine thing, but he kept his foot in. And I personally think that was a mistake. They could have done it a different way, but they got themselves stuck in another quagmire. So the arms are flowing, the intelligence is flowing, the money's flowing. Russia's not going to take the deal. So are we any further down the road, Freddie, than we were before Trump was president?
Well, it's a bit of a bottom line here, because that's what Rubio is saying in most of the press conference he participated in. He clearly said, well, if they don't accept this proposal, then we know where they stand. So you're throwing something really, really kind of difficult to digest, to go back to the cake story. They said they're going to get a night digestion, that's for sure. But they can't accept that. We already know that. So you're telling them, well, if you don't accept it, we know where you stand. Well, they haven't changed their tone. Their tune is the same from day one. Say, look, we're going to demilitarize, because you need to go back to that. What has been said. People say, oh, we don't know what the Russians want. No, we do know what they want. They want to demilitarize Ukraine, denazify Ukraine, period. Simple as that. It's not acceptable for them to have NATO troops, with missile range and drone range, just close to their border. And they've proven, I think the reason why, just last few days, the launch on Moscow is simply an example of what can be done when you get too close. So we can't just say that this cannot happen. Europe will never do that. Ukraine will never do that. It has happened, and it has happened over and over again, all the way up to a cooked up MI6 operation in Kirk's region, which obviously eventually will have to be looked into, because crime against humanity and what they've done in Kursk has not been revealed yet. But I can tell you the horror that has happened there is going to have to be definitely addressed, in a court. And I said Zelensky to die is definitely going to be a wanted man in Russia. So it doesn't matter what's going to happen. Zelensky is not taking a cushy retirement, that I can guarantee you, because what he's done to the people of Russia and what he's done to the people of the Donbass is going to have to answer that. Right? And that's where we are today. It's simply just putting Russia in a positions where they almost have no reason to say yes, and they're going to be almost forced in a way to say no, because they tend to stick to what they say. And if they tell you they're coming for you, you better believe it. And if they tell you that we don't want a militarized Ukraine capable of launching war on our territories, which I think they've defined pretty clearly, including Crimea and certain areas of the Donbass they've already conquered, and that's not going to be negotiable. And the reason why, it's a very simple reason, is because kids have died in the trenches. Russian militaries have died there. And in the memory of these soldiers, they'll never allow this land to be returned to those, which attacked them in the first place. And that's what it is. 8 years of war in Donbass needs to be addressed. Unless we're going to address this topic, unless we're going to address the crimes that has been committed in Odessa and other places against this population, then all the game itself is tricked, if you will. All the understanding and what has been offered to the public will never make any sense. That's why we have this bombardment about, Russia is a threat to Europe. Before the war, Russia was never a threat to Europe. What has made any difference? Is it the fact that perhaps NATO has lost this war? And is that the problem, that they actually cannot come to terms with, explaining the billions of dollars, the amount of Ukrainian people that have died simply to satisfy a need, to basically destroy the Russian economy and obviously to undermine Russian sphere of influence in these regions. Right? Getting rid of Russia was a bad idea. Right? And telling them now that you're going to impose negotiations on the terms on the war, they pretty much war. I think any military, expert would say that at this moment in time, there is no way that Ukraine, with the lack of manpower, can sustain this war much longer. So what are we doing? What are we discussing here? There's nothing to discuss, and I'm worried that the Russians are going to say these guys are fools. They don't understand us. They don't pay attention. We told them. They're not hearing. They're still listening to themselves, and they believe in the story they've manufactured. And that's really when danger comes, when people are starting to believe in their own propaganda.
You see the danger, Freddie, all great points that you've made there. I agree with everything wholeheartedly. Of course, we're on the same page.
I can't hear you, Patrick.
Okay, hold on for a second. 1 2 1 2 testing 1 2 3. Can you hear me now? Testing 1 2 3 testing.
Connected. We lost connection. I don't know why.
Okay, hold on. We're going to go to intermission. We'll go to a break, and we'll try to
just put
sort this out.
And let's see. Okay, Patrick, I'm back.
Okay, we're back. Have you got signal now?
I think there's my earpiece that I actually, the batteries, I've overused them today, so they might have gone.
That's
Anyway,
okay. I had my Monty Python intermission.
I like
Little
that. I was like,
interlude.
where did he get that from?
It's from The Life of Brian or something like that. I can't, or Monty Python's Flying Circus. But back to the conversation, Fred. So here's the danger, Freddie. Right? Are we going to be able to? Because this is the goal. This is that money shot. That's the goal. And then Putin extends his hand out. They shake. See, Trump's got his palm up, the usual power play. He's not going to get that on this one if it happens. But that's the goal. And the risk that we're seeing now is they might not get to this goal. Vladimir Putin is not going to publicly sit with Donald Trump unless it is for like the final signature with all this. There's going to be no dilly-dallying or anything like that. It's just not going to happen. And I don't see the steps being taken now that are going to get us to this money shot here, because that's the ultimate goal, isn't it? I mean, that's where we're supposed to be heading on this. This is where the expectations have been raised to ever since Trump was campaigning and says, I can stop this war in 24 hours. Just elect me president. Okay, we've done that. It's been a little bit longer than 24 hours. Okay, I accept, Donald. It's a lot more complex than maybe you thought. We're going to give you a little more slack. We're going to give you some more slack. So at least make this process credible. And instead, we're seeing these sort of shenanigans of synchronized messaging across all governments and even internet shills who are surrogates of the Trump administration or surrogates of Zelensky in the case of Lex Fridman. Unbelievable. So again, the propaganda's spinning right now. And I think Rubio, unless this is WWF wrestling, and it's 5D chess by Trump, this is all a mirage to throw the public off and make Zelensky not lose too much face in all of this. I say this is possible, remotely possible, but also equally possible is Rubio has dropped the ball badly on this because they don't have the skill set to actually take the ball and score on this against the Russians. So, and I think this is the problem, is they're so far behind, Freddie. And you said something that's really important. Unless they address the causes of this situation, the causes, you have to agree on how you got to this crisis to begin with. And all parties that were responsible need to own up. And the United States can't turn around and say, oh, we had nothing to do with that coup in Maidan. That wasn't us. Look, Fred, blame it on Obama. Blame it on Biden. It's not as if there's no evidence to throw Biden and his whole family under the bus with Ukraine. Victoria Nuland, Obama, Jeffrey Pyatt, you just chuck them all under the bus. Michael McFaul. These are all like shady characters anyway. Nobody's going to shed a tear for them. Just chuck them under the bus and be done with it. At least, because then you admit how Donbass got into this bind to begin with. We can have a truthful conversation. I know a lot of people have been telling me off, Freddie, saying, forget about the past. Forget about the past. We need to think about the future. Don't get too bogged down in the past. Well, listen, it matters to Russia, and they are the main stakeholder in terms of most powerful countries in the vicinity of this conflict. So you can't just walk away and say, oh, none of that mattered. Minsk, that was nothing. You know, the UN Security Council resolution, that was nothing. Oh, forget about that. This is, we're going to do a different deal here now. It doesn't, I'm sorry, but I'm just not, I'm not very confident that I've not heard the right things from any of these people so far, Fred.
To understand exactly the position of Russia, you just need to listen to Dugin. He was interviewed by George Napolitano not so long ago. I think they had a trip with Larry Johnson in Moscow, and they were basically having a time with Lavrov and so on. Very interesting. But Dugin, what he said is absolutely stayed with me, because George Nap asked him about, how does Russia see the United States? And Dugin's response on two occasions, we are at war with the US. This is undeniable that we are at war with the US, because they know the US is the people that triggered this war, this coup, after the coup in 2014. and they've basically been the main sponsor of NATO war or proxy war against Russia. So as far as Russians is concerned, they are dealing with the United States as an enemy, as someone that has attacked them, right? And they are at war with the United States. These are very strong words for a nation, for someone like Dugin, which obviously might not be an advisor to Putin, but someone that clearly has his ears and someone that has obviously a pretty good knowledge of what's going on in the Kremlin. I would say that you should hear these words and understand that Russia is at war with the United States. So if you want to talk about a 30-day ceasefires, which benefit more Kiev and its allies, you're not going to get any deal. And if you listen very carefully to what Lavrov also was saying, that you will know that he's made it he reiterated his statements on multiple occasions, and that Russia will not accept the presence of NATO troops in Ukraine under any circumstances, period. And whether it's a ceasefire, a part of a peace agreement, that is the red line. So again, Russia has drawn the red line and say that we cannot accept. Okay, and then the rest is, the fact that Lavrov is telling you that again the United States will not dictate the terms of these negotiations. Yet it is the US and its allies that are sending this first proposal and say we drafted something on a piece of paper quickly there. Let's see if it works. If they take the bite. That's how it sounds like. And I'm afraid there's not going to be a very positive answers. I think a conversation between Putin and Trump is very much required without anyone around the table. So that these two men can come together, leave the ego, outside, and then put the card on the table and say, okay, you want war, you're going to get war, because Russia has no problem with going to war. They have the capacity to defend themselves. They clearly can take on NATO, and NATO is not near in the next 4 or 5 years to be able to build a military defense complex that could sustain a long war of attrition with the Russians. So whatever, BS that comes out of Stallmers or Macron and even Merz, in Germany, it's irrelevant. This is rhetoric. This is boasting about capabilities and spending 800 billions of rearm Europe, a complete financial fraud that is presented as a way of boosting the European economy, and that for me, that's when I know I've been taken on a ride, because this, as far as I'm concerned, and any economics that is listening will recognize the military Keynesian economy models and principles there, whereby, there is no way to prove that there is productive capacity of the economy by applying, various, aggregates, and the demands, the total spending of the economy, and trying to present this as something that is going to be productive, when clearly we're talking about, strong influence of economic output and inflation instead. And that's my problem. Money is going to be basically make us broke. We have no economic impetus, if you will. We do not have a platform to address the multilateral world that has been built when we were sleeping, listening to the US policies and going along with whatever US good or bad idea was at the time. The Green Deal is out of the window. The COVID is gone. There is no more belief in the institutions. What is left for Europe to negotiate? What is left for Europe to stand on its own and say, you know what, we have something to offer? And I'm asking myself as a European, I'm French European because I happen to live in Europe. I'm not a pro-European. I think I made that very clear. But really, my understanding is that what is it? What are we going to offer to China? What are we going to offer to Russia? Russia is a massive country, huge amount of energy, huge amount of mineral resources and rare minerals. They have gas, they have energy, they have rare minerals. They don't need it. They have uraniums, which we need, which the United States needs, And what do we have left? France is basically on a crisis like a kid because Macron is so upset over Russia's influence in Africa, in the sub-Saharan countries, Senegal, Niger, Burkina Faso, all these countries where the Russians have put a bit of a stop and say, if you want to mess around with us with NATO operation in Ukraine, we can show you as well. We can mess you around in this particular part of the world. And all that is a tit for tat, and it's not constructive. I think it is time for Europe to really address the real problem of Europe, which is the lack of economic, basically, dynamism. Right? We are living because we are rich states. You know, how we got rich, that's another question, of course, but for another day. But we are living on the past, and we have not built the road, and we have not paved the road for our success for the years to come. And we can start slowly to see a little bit Europe starting to open discussions with China, because they realize that US, it's going to be applying, US first policy. And they already had a test of that, American first policy. That's what they're going to get for the next 4 years. So they're going to have to open the options, because they really have nothing to offer. And the little that we have to offer, we at least need to entertain a better relationship with Asia and with China. And if we don't do that, and we keep on hammering Russia, we're going to go down. There's no doubt about it. It's going to fall.
Yeah, no doubt about it. I mean, the Rearm Europe package by von der Leyen and company, all that is basically a green light to the central bankers of Europe to pile on a whole bunch of debt, €1 trillion worth of debt onto European member states. In order to, rearm Europe. Rearm them for what? We go back to square one of this conversation. Rearm them for a problem created by NATO, created by the United States, effectively, and Europe's being dragged into it. Europe suffers for it, and now they're going to be in debt. And guess what? Cut back on social spending, cut back on healthcare, cut back on it all. Austerity. Then they've got to choose between do we do austerity, or do we build up our military-industrial complex? And we have to do the military-industrial complex because Russia, right? Russia's going to invade us. It's a lie. It's a complete fantasy. It's a fairy tale. Instead, the easy thing to do is to put your hands up. New administration say, look, we're sorry. This was a mistake. We're sorry, Ukraine, but, we'll help to, rebuild you. We'll still give you some money. We'll still help you get back on your feet. But this war is over. This war is over, and it's time for us and everybody to raise the rising tide of all ships of prosperity. And there's only one way to do that right now, and that's to look east. And this is where the problem is, because Britain doesn't want that, and the United States is. Trump says he doesn't mind, but the next 4 years, a Democrat president could come into power, or a Democratic Congress, and flip all of this on its head, Freddie. All this Trump rapprochement business could go in 4 years. So it's like, it's not going to change anything on a substantial level. And what you need, and this is what I've been arguing recently, I'll keep arguing, we need the president or the vice president or somebody or Rubio to articulate publicly, this is the new U.S. geopolitical position. This is how we envision the global order, not just America first. No, how does the America incorporate itself into the world? That's what's missing. And if they can make that pitch, Fred, and get other countries to buy into it and think, okay, we can work with that, then you can move forward together, and everyone can start being prosperous together. Unless that happens, we're just going to see more stagnation, more quagmires, and it's just going to delay an ultimate resolution. And guess what? Eurasia is going to get on with business. And eventually, I think, Freddie, Europe will eventually get on to business. Unfortunately, not soon enough. Not before it hits rock bottom economically, because you got some real crazies in charge here. Here's Alexander Dugin. That's the interview with Judge Napolitano you're talking about, Freddie. Great to see Judge Knapp is doing amazing work. He is one of the best in America. I think now has established himself as the top interviewer, journalist in America. I even think he did a better job than Tucker Carlson on some of these interviews he's done. So great props to Judge Knapp, and he's out there, as you said, with Larry Johnson and the gang, the Judging Freedom Gang. They're doing great work. They're great men. They're great guys. We're so grateful for them, having committed themselves so heavily to these causes over the last couple of years. and they filled a massive hole left by a derelict mainstream media. So we're very happy about that.
They're not prepared to play the game any longer, especially, I mean, Judge Knapp, someone very familiar with the media, it's someone that knows how the game is played. There's a time, if you have a spine and if you have some kind of integrity and you want the best for your country, you're going to have to stop playing the game, because this is what the US has done. They play the game where they own all the, the monopoly, they own all the real estates, and plus they are the one that makes the rules for the game. So you're never going to win at this game. So you abandon the game and you create your own rules and you create your own game, and you see who comes on top and who wants to participate. And I think that the same for people that that support the Judge Knapp is that these are people that know, like Johnson's with the CIA, or all the other guys and Scott Readers and so on. These are people that have lived, that understand diplomatic circle, that understand the shadow world, of intelligence and diplomacies, and it's hard to lie to them because they've lived it. They used to do that for living, so it's hard for them to swallow that pill. And other people like myself, come from complete different backgrounds, but evolve also in diplomatic realm. I've understood a very long time ago that this is not how you approach, whether the Russians, whether the Arab world, everybody has a different cultures, and all that needs to be really taken into consideration when you sit down at high level, because every word is scrutinized. That's what your first rule you learn is: be careful. Every word you say is scrutinized. One word, they will never know. You will never know you did bad, but you won't be invited again. Right? And that's really this kind of principle. But when you can do that on national television and being broadcasted around the world, saying every 2 words are wrong words, and you expect a successful negotiations, you just were stupid or incompetent, or perhaps both.
Yeah, I just ordered the book on Amazon called Provoked by Scott Horton, who's a pretty accomplished American pundit and historian, and I'm going to get that book probably today or tomorrow. I'll read that over the weekend, and that's also part of that, that historical truth baseline to start discussions and negotiations from. It's like you have to know how you got there to begin with. You really do. And the older geopolitical thinkers, and okay, I don't want to get into a debate about Henry Kissinger's pros and cons, okay? But when we're talking about Kissinger, Zbigniew Brzezinski, we're talking about some of these James Baker, we're talking about some of these U.S. diplomats in the past, and the fact Cyrus Vance, Caspar Weinberger, these people, they understood European history, American history, global history. And so they begin their discussions with their counterparts on that basis. Is they have an agreement, they both parties understand how we got to this point. Then if we both understand that, we then can say, how are we going to move forward together? If you're disagreeing about how you got there, or you don't understand or appreciate, or you think that the other side's lying, so forget it. There's not going to be no meaningful negotiations. And I feel like this is where the U.S. is. They built such a mountain of lies and propaganda. They've done it with Syria. They've done it with Gaza. They're doing it with Ukraine and Russia. They're saying Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. There was no full-scale invasion in 2014. There was no full-scale invasion in Crimea in 2014. There wasn't even a full-scale invasion with the SMO on February 25th, 2022. That's not a full-scale invasion, and it wasn't unprovoked. It wasn't unprovoked.
Not at all.
And it was a reaction to the collapse of a UN Security Council resolution that America signed, that Britain signed, that the French signed. It was unanimous. Resolution 2202. Oh, but we don't care about the UN. The UN's a failure. That's what the Americans will tell you. Just because they don't want to take responsibility for their own failure. So they're gaslighting. So Washington has just become a gaggle of gaslighters. Whether they're Democrat or whether they're Republican, they're all a bunch of useless gaslighters at this point. And the rest of the world's not gaslighting. Oh, but the Russians must be lying because they're Russian. In the American mind, Russians lie because they're Russians. Circular logic. The Chinese are dishonest because they're Chinese. Oh, because they're communist or whatever. So we can't trust them. We can only, we're telling the truth, or our version of the story is the only version, and we're going to force it down your throat. And Zelensky told us that Putin's evil, so we'll start on that basis of an assumption. So you got this little grifter, and this guy. Listen, I don't want to get onto it. A cul-de-sac here, which translated in French means bottom of the bag, cul-de-sac. And at the bottom of the bag, you'll find this. You'll find the guys like this, basically. At the bottom of the cul-de-sac is this little demon. He's promised the Nazis in Ukraine that he will bring the money in from the West, from Europe. That's why he goes around, does the road tour and the photo ops, because it keeps the nationalists and the Nazis on side. And he said, I'll keep the money flowing, just keep me in power. No elections, I'll stay in power and keep me, and just keep fighting. We got to keep fighting the Russians, or the money's going to stop. And they've bred this corrupt class in Ukraine that's living off of Western funds and welfare and weapons to keep this god-awful war going. That's a losing gambit. And this little guy has just put himself in that position where he's completely brainwashed the Western politicians to think that he is the messiah of democracy, and he's fooled his Nazis at home, and he's kind of fooled some of the public in the West, but we're waking up to it. So this guy has engineered this incredible situation. He is so Machiavellian, this little guy. Very manipulative. You saw him try to take on Trump in front of the world. It failed. But the balls of this guy, the front, as they say, the front, this little guy. I mean, he's unbelievable. Fred, this is the problem right here that you're looking at.
It is a problem, and it's more importantly, is been emboldened. It's surrounding yourself around people like the European Union, Ursula von der Leyen, Keir Starmer, and others, Kalakayas, and all these guys. It's just the whole circus of the European Union, plus now with the UK joining the party. I think it's simply the fact that you can be nobody, but if you're meant to believe that you represent so much to the world, and it doesn't really understand why he represents so much. He thinks it's about because there's a true genuine appetite, and it's a true genuine desire from the majority of Europeans to protect Ukraine, and to bring democracy to the world. And that's just a nonsense. I don't think even he believed that, to be honest. But what's really important, and I hope he'll get that understanding eventually at some stage, is that this entire circus is self-funded and fund itself. It's really very interesting to see how Europe is funding himself and his own propaganda. And Thomas Fazzi, a journalist, Italian journalist, has written a great piece on that. I think everyone, I don't know if you can put it on the screen, but that's a great piece, explaining the process on how the European Union is funding, these NGOs to promote their own image, their own project, their own success, their own ideology, not bringing anyone that has a discording view, someone that's going to bring a debate and elevate the debates at a European level. None of that must happen. Everything is a microcosm, if you will, and it has to survive inside of that bubble. And everyone in there, including NATO, this is really a club. It is a club. It is a sect almost, where everybody is forced to believe everything that has been said. So if the mantra is Ukraine is great, there's no Nazi there, we've never provoked, this was an unprovoked attack on the Ukrainians, and 2014 Maidan never took place, there was never a coup, what are the Russians are talking about? You have to embrace that. You cannot be part of that, because that's what you're going to be living, that's what you're going to breathe 24/7. When you go to the office, when you come back, when you go to meetings, that's the only people you're going to meet. They all speak from the same microphone, if you will, and from the same tech sheet. And that's really the problem that we're having at the moment, is no ideas is allowed. Having an idea or presenting a divergent idea is criminal almost in Europe. That's what Dugin also was talking about during this interview with John Knapp. He is guilty of having a different opinion, is guilty of having ideas, and that's why it cannot be published. That's what any other ideas. But fascism, neo-Nazism, you can put book out there, you can present it. That's what he explained. That you won't have any problem. There's no censorship for this kind of ideology, pornography, and all that kind of things. No problem. But if you want to have an idea that's going to go against the institution, it's going to go against the globalist movements that we've been under for 20 years, not 5 years or 4 years, 20 years and more probably, then you're not accepted, you're not invited, and you become a pariah. You're outside of the media. Journalists like myself will never be invited anywhere. We're just going to be staying in the background, writing articles, hoping that someone's going to read them. We do a great job. We do the great work. We do the foundations, the really grinding of what journalism is, which is to really deconstruct what has been presented to us first, because we have double job. First, we need to deconstruct the narrative that has been provided to us, because often it is ideology based. It's not journalism. And then after that, we need to investigate, to actually trying to find a thread of truth out there that we can present to the public. And it's really tiring, because you do a double work when you shouldn't have to do that in the first place. We should be able to debate our ideas on a common platform for the greater good, and that's not the case.
Yeah, well, I mean, we are building a platform where we're grateful to have some of these live streaming platforms to work on now, and we are currently live streaming on a few of them. So we're getting there, Fred. We're getting there, and have to keep soldiering on and keep cracking. There's plenty of stuff to cover. There are plenty of missions to fly in this world still. So we're going to be there to do that. And of course, we appreciate your role in that, Freddie Ponton, and go to 21st Century Wire, and you can see a lot of Freddie's work there. If you just go up to the team list you'll see Freddie's archive, and others will also be broadcasting on Sunday at the Sunday Wire. You can find us there. These times are slightly changing because of daylight savings in the United States. So I think it'll be an earlier UK start time, 4 p.m. for the next couple of weeks until Easter, I think. But that's our other show on Sunday, folks. And also we're having a winter fundraising drive, which is technically finished, but please support our work. We need your help going forward. We've got some great programming, great content, and great independent investigative journalism, which we're putting out every week. So we really appreciate those of you who have supported us. It's been great. We've been able to add new programming like this show, the Midweek Wire. So we really appreciate it. It's because of you we're able to do all of this work, folks. So donate in any way possible. It'll go to good use. And we really appreciate it. Subscribe and become a member as well at 21wire.tv. That's our preferred level of support. It's very, very inexpensive, but it goes a long way, folks. So just go to our website, hit the donate support button, or go to my X profile. You'll see the link there to 21stcenturywire.com. Freddie Ponton, again, thank you for joining us this week. I mean, hopefully we made some sense of this negotiations by the United States. So we'll see. I think at least we've done a lay of the land here, Fred. So
Witkoff is going to be in Russia tomorrow, so we know that we got a good incline of what the answer. But I think we already had the answers. We just need to hear it, so it's clear, and there's no confusions in everybody's mind. Anyway, thanks for having me, Patrick. Really appreciate to be on the show, and we'll catch up maybe not next week because I'm in Paris, but the week after.
Okay. It's great to have you, Freddie. Take care. And again, follow Freddie and his work up at our website, 21stcenturywire.com. Ladies and gentlemen, that's all we have time for this Midweek Wire. We'll see you again on Sunday for another barnstormer like we did this week. So until then, take care, everybody. All the best.
Thank you.